Good evening and welcome to Talk of the Neighborhoods. I'm Joe Heisler, your host, coming to you from the BNN Live Studios, Eggleston Square, Jamaica Plain, where tonight on the Boston Neighborhood Network, it's that time of the year. No, not Paddy's Day, not spring, not even Easter. It's special election season. In the latest instance in the last few years, another special election for a state house seat. This one, the 1st Suffolk and Middlesex Senate District. That's a seven-way seven Democrats in this race for this election on April 12th. No Republicans, so the winner wins the seat. Tonight, two more of the candidates in this race. First up tonight, Joseph Boncory. He is an attorney at a well-known family-owned firm in East Boston. He's from Winthrop, also the chair of the Winthrop Housing Authority. Then on the second half, Diana Hwang. She is a former State House aide and an Asian American activist from East Boston. She's also in the race. You'll meet both of them tonight. I'm Joe Heisler, your host. Tonight, the 1st Suffolk and Middlesex Senate race. It's a seven-way Democratic primary, no Republicans. The winner of the April 12th primary wins this seat. District runs from Revere and Winthrop on the North Shore all the way through East Boston, North End, Chinatown, downtown, Beacon Hill, and over into Cambridge, the Cambridgeport area. And tonight, two of the candidates, and in this segment, joining me, she is a former State House aide, a activist in East Boston and in the Asian American community. Diana Hwang joins us, and nice to have you here. Thanks so much for coming and joining us. And first-time candidate, right?
First-time candidate.
Well, so you get a pass.
No pressure.
No pressure at all. How is the campaign going? Now, I see you've got some high-profile endorsements to start, and what's been the reaction?
Are you impressed by that, Joe?
I am. A couple of very good sitting senators.
Yeah.
Linda Dorsina-Forey, Sonia Chang Diaz.
Amazing. The only two women of color in the state Senate.
There you go.
Just to comma that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you're looking to be the third. What made you decide to run? That's a big jump. It's a big leap.
Yeah.
You've worked up
Sure.
there. You know what it takes, but
Sure.
nonetheless, you're asking people to judge you. It's not necessarily comfortable feeling for some people. How are you handling it?
I mean, I'll say that there's nothing that can really prepare you to be a first-time candidate because all of a sudden you're switching and you're talking about yourself all the time. I find myself at the end of the day completely just so thirsty, and I realize it's because I've been talking all day and you're running from one thing to the next. But having some of these conversations that you get to have with your neighbors, people that you would never meet on the campaign trail, if you weren't on the campaign trail, have been some of those meaningful for me. I was talking to my dad because we're thinking about doing a little outreach to the Chinese American community, and it was one of the first times I had heard my dad's story, his immigration story to this country, and we always had a relationship where he was the parent and I was the child, and I hadn't heard some of the stories that he shared, and he grew up poor in Taiwan. He lived with extended family on a farm. When he was in the 7th grade, he was working the farm. He had to work the farm when he was a child, and he almost cut his finger off, and they didn't have good medical care in the village he lived in. So, he still has trouble with his hands today, and I didn't realize that was the story, and he really immigrated here to give me and my brother a better life.
Not an easy life, to say the least.
No.
This district is one where there's a sizable immigrant population, certainly in East Boston, but even in other parts of the city as well. Everything from Italo-Americans in the North End to Chinatown, of course. Does that help you? And how do you see the race kind of breaking down? Where's the advantage that you have in this race?
Oh, you're going right into the politics talk. Right into the shop talk.
That's what I do. That's what I do.
It's straight out of the gate. I would say that as diverse as this district seems, right, that it's from East Boston, goes around to Beacon Hill and Cambridge, I think I feel very connected to this district because this district ultimately has a story that's similar to mine. You know, I'm a daughter of immigrants who struggled and fought to stay in the middle class. And that's what I remember growing up. That's what I remember feeling, knowing that my parents were worried about money all the time. And really that feeling of instability and insecurity, like the bottom could drop at any moment. That's what I remember growing up, and that's what has stayed with me. And there was a moment in time where my mom lost her job, and then my dad lost his job, and that was their worst fears come true. And I think that everyone understands that in this district. Everyone has lived that experience, that no matter who you are or where you come from, whether you immigrated here 100 years ago from southern Italy or Ireland, or 10 years ago from El Salvador or China, that we all share very similar hopes and aspirations, but we all also share very similar fears and frustrations that government isn't always listening to us.
How will that experience guide you if you're elected at the State House?
I think it's guided me throughout my entire career. I think that, working in government for the state rep who wrote the original Affordable Care Act, was really working to expand the senior circuit breaker 10 years ago, working to fight for additional funding for addiction treatment and support, what we're still talking about now, fighting for in-state tuition. I noticed how little diversity there was in the State House, and I realized that meant that not everyone's voices were at the table. And so I went to go work for the Women's Caucus as their executive director, really because 10 years ago, 25% women legislators, 10 years later, still 25% women legislators wanted to amplify their voices and work on these issues. And then started an organization, the only political leadership organization for Asian American women in the country, really around this idea that we need to bring in people who don't feel like they have a voice, the people who feel most disconnected from government. So we recruit and trained 50 young, low-income immigrant Asian American women, women who feel like they feel intimidated by government, feel disconnected from government, but need government the most. And we attacked the problem at its root about why government looks the way it does. It doesn't feel like, it's hard to imagine you belong there if you don't see faces like yours. So you bring them in, you train them, you mentor them, you support them. And we've graduated almost 50 who are now able to bring the State House back to their communities. And so I think everything I've done my entire career has been about advocating and fighting for women, immigrants, and working families, because that's who I am and that's where I come from. And that will continue to guide me as state senator.
Will that be enough to win this seat? Now, it's traditionally, and I've asked all the candidates about this, traditionally been seen as kind of an Eastie seat, given the most recent history of it. It's actually
I'm from Eastie, Joe.
I know. So does that?
So maybe that works out for me.
Does that help you? Do you have a large enough base there, or in the rest of the district to kind of give you a leg up on this race?
So one of the things I'll say is that I think the conventional wisdom that you need a base is wrong here, only because no one's base is going to be enough to win this race. That's why I think
no one is.
No one. Everyone's base is going to get chopped up and eaten into. So I think that, obviously, I was at the polls in Chinatown on March 1st, and it was one of the most warm and heartening experiences of my life. We were talking to elderly Chinese voters in Chinese, and when they realized it was me, they gave me a hug, they thanked me. I think a lot of them are excited about the idea of a Chinese woman representing them in State House. So I think I think that we're strong there, but beyond that, I think that in Beacon Hill and Cambridge, there are areas that believe that there needs to be more diversity in government and want to vote for someone like me. I think that, in East Boston, a couple weeks ago when it was still winter, it was -2 degrees, and we had a volunteer meeting. We were worried that no one was going to show up, and 40 people showed up, and it was Paul Travellini, who you would say represents, the traditional East Boston political neighborhood, standing next to the progressives from Jeffries Point, standing next to Latino leaders and Chinatown leaders. So that's really the kind of campaign that we're building. We have captains in every part of the district. We have the Gill family, who is long-time respected family in Winthrop leading our effort there. We are pulling together a coalition that I think is what it takes to win, that really draws across this entire district, but is also, we're building the kind of coalition that you need to represent a district as diverse as this one. So, having someone like, having people like Linda Dorsey-Nafori and Sonia Chang Diaz, but also having the Paul Travel.
Sends a message. Well,
yeah.
If you're fortunate enough to be elected, and just for the sake of this argument, let's talk about some of the issues in play up there.
All right, Joe, let's go right into it.
As soon as as soon as the primary's over, if you win that, you win the seat, essentially.
Absolutely.
Because there's no Republicans. One of the hottest issues up there right now, and it's kind of gone back and forth, they haven't been able to do it, is the whole issue of charter schools.
Sure.
And it's likely to be on your plate as soon as you walk in the door, so to speak. The governor wants to lift the cap. Many Democrats want to lift the cap. A lot of parents want more options, more choices. A lot of them, people of color.
Yeah.
What do you say to them? Do you support lifting the cap on charter schools?
So what I'll say is that, I'm the product of public schools. My public school education got me to Dartmouth. And I believe so strongly in the power of public education to break cycles of poverty, to educate immigrants and children of immigrants like me to succeed. But you're right, when I'm out in the neighborhoods, I am hearing parents who are just so need their kid to get off the waiting list to a charter school, because I think we would all agree that not all of our BPS schools are where they should be. And I believe that charter schools can be places of innovation and create great models of alternative education, right? That we can learn from.
So something you'd support, or something you definitely
I think it's about a balance. For me, it's about making sure that it's not luck that you go to a good school. So for me, it's about, first of all, I think the reality is that the reason why we're having this charter school, public school debate, and it's because there's not enough funding going to schools, ultimately.
And which raises another point.
Yeah.
We've got just a minute or two left.
Sure.
The millionaire's tax.
The millionaire's
the
tax.
fair tax, or whatever they're calling it. You support that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, it really concerns me when we constantly talk about cutting, and a lot of the things that we're seeing, a lot of the frustrations we're seeing with the T raising fares and then cutting late night service, as well as 1,000 kids.
There's a source of funding for those types of things.
Exactly.
How about legalization of marijuana?
I want to see, I'm in a wait and see mode, because I want to see how the experiment works out in Colorado. There are a lot of issues that occur when it's not legal on the federal level, but it is on the state level. But I am as strongly in support of the recent changes of decriminalizing recreational use, because you shouldn't be incarcerated for a minor offense, and quarries can ruin people's lives.
Well, if you're elected, of course, you're a Democrat, but you will have to work with a Republican governor. Can you work with this guy?
Absolutely.
This is, he's talked about those kinds of changes, cutting back on late night service, amongst others, cutting the number of state employees. Can you work with him?
Absolutely. I mean, the kind of campaign we're building is about building coalitions, about being able to pull people from across the district, as diverse as this district is. And I've been a bridge builder my entire life, coming from a family of immigrants who struggled with their English and having to bridge that cultural divide, going to Dartmouth, but not really coming from a place that was middle class, going to a school that was a place of immense privilege and having to bridge that divide, and then going to the State House and feeling like it wasn't a place where everyone's voices were heard, and working to bridge that divide. So,
well, and we've got just a couple of seconds left.
Sure.
Some people would say that part of the problem is the reason that all of those issues are on the ballot is the legislature has shirked its responsibility to kind of take on those tough issues and make those choices. Are you satisfied with the way the legislature is being run right now, in the House, the Senate, and can you make changes there?
Two things. I would say that ballot initiatives make me nervous, because I think it really ends up being a game of money. So I think I know that Senator Sonia Chang Diaz is working on a compromise bill around the charter school and district school legislation, so I know that a lot of these things are being worked on. I think that I'm under no illusions of what I'm walking into. That's what having State House experience and having worked in that building and worked to change that building from the inside gives me, and is why I'm a strong
What about the
candidate.
culture up there, though? You talked about 10 years ago there were 25% women. There still is.
Sure.
What was missing? What is it? What's the reason for that? What do you think's been the reason that there hasn't been more of a reflection of gender, ethnicity, race as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same reasons why women and people of color don't run, right? There are actual barriers to entry, right? The fact that it costs as much as it does to run a state senate race, the fact that you have to leave your job to really do this full time. So I think literally the barriers to entry of even running is hard. But also I think, it's hard to imagine you belong there if you don't see faces like yours. There are just a lot of factors, and you really have to attack that problem at its root, which is why, I started an organization literally to bring in those voices to attack that problem.
What ultimately, I'm guessing in the course of that, you're talking to people, what ultimately made you decide to run and say, hey, why not me?
I think that I've been working on these issues my entire life. I've been working to change the State House, and I've been telling these young women that they need to think about running for office. So I think really having that moment of realizing that I've been telling these young women that they deserve to have their voices at the table was when I realized I needed to seriously look at it.
What about me? Right? What about you? Diana Hwang is a former State House aide and an activist in the community, East Boston, where she hails from, one of 7 Democrats in the race for the 1st Suffolk and Middlesex Senate seat, and that's a special election. The primary, April 12th. If you live in, Revere or Winthrop, but certainly East Boston, downtown area, North End, Chinatown, Beacon Hill, or Cambridgeport, this is the race to watch, the race to vote in. Diana,
Thank
nice
you
to have
so
you
much,
here.
Joe.
Wish we had more time. If you win, you'll come back and join us, I hope.
Oh, absolutely.
Best of luck in your
Thank you so much,
race.
Joe.
We'll have more on this race next week as we continue our coverage. Unfortunately, we're out of time for tonight. For the entire staff and crew here at BNN, I'm Joe Heisler, your host. Thank you for watching Talking the News. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.